Last month, we took Liesel on her very first international trip at 6 months old, and it was a big one. It lasted for practically a whole month. It included 3 continents and 6 countries and many stops along the way, and it was full of so many firsts for her. First time in an airplane, in a bus, in a ferry, in a boat, in a train, in a cab, in a hotel, in an airport, of course, and along that line, a railway station and a harbor. First time on an island. First time on a seashore. First time in a 2,000-year-old palace. And the list goes on and on. It was fabulous. It was wonderful for all of us. Maybe some of you begin to think that we, her parents, are crazy taking a 6-month-old on such an ambitious trip for her first time out. We'll leave it up to you to decide that, but the reason we decided to do this video is because, well, of course for us, it was the first time and we didn't know what to expect, and we did our best to prepare, and that included a lot of research, but it's always helpful to hear other parents' experiences and how they make it work. And so we wanted to share some of the strategies we used, which turned this trip into one of the easiest, most enjoyable, funniest, most relaxing month of Liesel's life to date. Of course, some of these things might not apply to you, and this is definitely not a comprehensive how-to for traveling with a baby on such a trip. Because it's basically impossible to do a video like that, first of all, since every trip and every baby and every family is so unique. But it's about the things which stood out to us as first-time parents on this adventure. And if you have any additional suggestions, if you're an experienced traveler with a baby, or you wish to expand on anything you find in this video, then by all means, feel free to share in the comments so that others can benefit from your experience, and maybe this can become a helpful travel resource for new parents or new travelers with children. So let me start by saying that to make the adventure even more interesting and lightweight, as well as economical, we decided to travel with 0 checked luggage. None. So, how do you travel for a month with a 6-month-old baby in so many countries with different climates and resources with 0 checked luggage? How is it possible? Well, let me tell you how we did it. First, use your imagination. What I mean is, the first thing we did is we took our time planning and preparing every detail. at least as far as we could envision, starting a month or more ahead of time. That included imagining every step of the trip, every location, trying to visualize the specific details and needs of every moment of the day, every activity, every transition through the day. Of course, we were not able to foresee every detail, but this visualization exercise and the planning that went along with it helped immensely. Secondly, I want to share about baby strategies, because 6-month-old babies can't be reasoned with, and you can't explain what's going to happen or what is happening, why they're feeling the way they're feeling, or how to cope. So it's a good idea to start preparing a baby of this age ahead of time, cultivating some strategies to help them adapt and cope along the way. Like, one that was really important to me was a portable, transportable go-to-sleep routine. How am I going to get baby Liesel to sleep in so many different locations under so many circumstances? So I developed a routine that was able to go anywhere. For me, it was important for her to be able to sleep in my arms, on my lap. No matter the lighting, the noise level, the temperature, she had to be able to sleep on my lap. That worked for us. And every baby is different, so each baby is going to have its little things, little details that help it do that. For example, a designated lullaby song or a certain falling asleep position. Well, she developed that along the way. She became very particular about what position she would be held in to go to sleep. And if I got it right, it was like magic. It could be a specific sleepy time blanket, whatever works well for your own baby. Thirdly, transporting the baby. How to transport the baby in all these different places. We used a baby carrier, which we nicknamed the kangaroo pouch, and a stroller. It's a good idea to have a baby carrying pack because, okay, you can use a stroller practically anywhere, especially if it's a small one, but to have a way to carry the baby on your body helps keep the baby safe while allowing you to have your hands free. It vastly reduces back and shoulder strain, and unlike the stroller, the baby is able to stay close to your body and can hear your voice and feel your scent, your breath, your heartbeat. It's incredibly comforting. And that way you're not always having to pull out the stroller every step of the way. Stroller is incredibly useful. We debated, should we take a stroller or not, or just carry the baby? We settled on stroller. You are entitled to a stroller on the plane and should not have to pay anything extra, regardless of its dimensions or your ticket category. We traveled very economically, and so we didn't have a ticket that allowed us a lot of carry-on luggage, but the stroller is permitted if you have a baby. Alternatively, you can take a car seat. Sometimes you're even allowed to take both, but because of our travel situation, we went for a stroller. We wanted to be as light as possible. We stuck with the stroller. If the stroller falls within certain folded dimensions, you are allowed to take it on the plane with you. On the other hand, if you want a larger, more comfy stroller, you can gate check it. There are pros and cons to each. On the downside of gate checking, we learned from some other experienced parents that in some airports around the world, if you gate check the stroller and you want to collect it afterwards, you cannot collect it at the gate. You have to go to the luggage carousel, or even worse, another separate designated room to collect the stroller, rather than merely pick it up at the door of the plane when you exit. If you have time for that, it's okay. If you're not using an airport which requires that, fabulous. But we needed to be able to move forward and progress as quickly as possible. So we went for a very small stroller and just took it straight on the plane with us with our carry-ons. The stroller actually ended up being far more useful than I expected. I haven't used a stroller a lot with Liesel in her first 6 months, but this trip, it was a lifesaver in so many situations. Just like you need your hands free and you can carry the baby on you, sometimes you need your body free. You need to be able to sit down and eat, or you need to be able to bend over and move luggage and things like that. So the stroller was great. We could put her in, she was safe, contained, and we could set her by the table with us. It became a sort of traveling high chair, and it worked for the long treks through the airport when we had to go from one terminal to another terminal. We could even put some of our luggage on it. So it was really worth it for us. Another good thing to know is that some airports have a special check-in gate for families with strollers. Not families with babies, we learned that the hard way. Families with strollers, so that you don't have to wait in line with the crowds going through security. One time, we went without a stroller, and on that leg of the trip, we weren't able to use the special family gate because they said, oh, no, it's only for if you have a stroller with you. That was a bit disappointing. Always have a stroller with you. It's really nice, so keep an eye out for those gates. Not every airport has them, but when they do, they're lovely. Fourthly, packing. How did we pack for this trip? As I said, we traveled basic economy, which is very limited in luggage allowance. We were allowed one personal item for each adult and only a diaper bag for the baby. But we got around this just fine by using a backpack for the baby's diaper bag, and of course, each of us had a backpack as our personal item. So we had 3 backpacks, the stroller, and the kangaroo pouch. Now, of course, every airline has its own dimension and weight limits, but families with babies are always allowed to board ahead of even the first-class passengers and military personnel. Listen to the announcement when they start boarding and they tell you families with babies, families with young children, usually it's within the 2-year-old range, can now board. And when that announcement comes, jump up and go. It is beautiful. It's worth it. And in our experience, when you have a baby in your arms, nobody is going to make you weigh or measure your backpacks. That never happened to us once. Actually, they didn't even count them. For some legs of our trip, we also carried another large grocery bag with food, and nobody even mentioned it. Now, packing. Of course, we had a lot to include, especially since we were going to be experiencing several different climates along the way. And remember, this was a whole month-long trip. Also, in addition to the necessities, one thing which we grouped with the necessities was to bring gifts for friends and hosts along the way. So we had to have room for gifts, we had to have room for clothes, room for food, water, shoes, everything we needed for a month. The life-saving item is called vacuum storage bags. And for us, these were far better than the travel cubes that are so popular and that many people like to use. Why? Well, in our experience, they reduced the luggage volume by at least 50%. They're incredibly easy to use. You just have to make sure you fold your clothes as smooth and flat and evenly as possible, distributed throughout the bags. We didn't even carry the hand pump with us because we knew that we could find a vacuum cleaner anywhere along the way. So, pack the clothes in, put the vacuum on for a couple seconds, zoop, everything just is compacted, we drop it in the backpack, and off we go. Now, this is not a paid ad at all. I'm not getting anything for it, but just to be helpful, I'm going to include the link to the storage bags that we used, just so you can see, and of course you can use anything you wish. Shoes. Shoes are a challenge whenever you're traveling. Many people I know travel with only one pair of shoes, but as I said, we were traveling in several different climates, and we wanted some good, comfortable walking, lounging shoes. We also wanted to be able to dress up a bit. So, most shoes do just fine in a vacuum bag, but of course, leather shoes, for example, would be damaged. And so the way to carry those is, and actually any pair, we ended up just doing all of ours like this, carry the extra pair by hanging it on the outside of the backpack. We just had a couple carabiner clips and tie the laces in a knot, clip them on, and in our experience, we could clip all manner of things on the outside of our backpacks and nobody complained. We had shoes, water canisters, even a folded blanket. I think sometimes we had other things hanging there, a hat. It makes the backpack look massive, but the backpack itself is within the dimensions. Not necessarily the weight, but nobody weighed. And that's how we got around the world. What about clothes? Well, we wore our bulkiest outfits during the plane travel so that we wouldn't have to pack heavy hoodies, jackets, jeans. And for the baby, even though I'm using cloth diapers at home, we chose to use disposables during this trip. And I only packed enough for 2 days because I knew that I could buy more whenever we arrived at each new destination. So my goal was enough to get across the ocean to the next continent and an extra day's worth just so that we don't have to run out to the supermarket the instant we get there. We each had one nice dress-up outfit. The baby had 3, of course, because I'm a new mom. I have to make her look her best. And then we simply chose basic outfits which could be layered and worn different ways according to occasion and weather. Of course, you could even travel lighter if you just stop at a cheap store at your destination, buy a couple extra t-shirts, and then leave them behind when you move on. We didn't do that, but it's an option we might consider in the future. Now, food. Our transatlantic tickets, because they were basic economy, did not include meals on the plane. So rather than purchasing all our food along the way, we chose to pack enough food to last for 30 hours of travel because airport food is tricky to grab when you have tight plane connections, and it's also a whole lot less expensive if you're not paying the high price for a little sandwich or something. We kept it very simple. Dried fruits, nuts. We started with a few boiled eggs for the first day, plus baby food. Remember, baby food and drink is not subject to the liquid restrictions when going through security. So just be sure everything is sealed, clearly labeled, decently packed. The airlines that we took did not have a specified quantity allowance. They simply said a reasonable amount. Well, we're traveling for a month, so the reasonable amount was quite significant. You should be able to take as much as your baby needs. This is what I used. And of course, you can find all kinds of brands of these baby pouches. They're nice. Of course, it's not recommended because of baby's oral development. It's not recommended to have them sucking out of the top regularly, but I felt no guilt using it that way on the trip. I could just unscrew the top and she could get her meal straight from here. No mess, no fuss. On we go. We also took 2 empty water bottles, which we could fill after passing through the security checkpoints, and that saved us from having to buy a lot of bottles of water on the planes, in the airports, and other transport moments of the trip. Now, this was our first trip with the baby, but it is not our first international trip, and we learned another trick quite a long while ago, which we utilized again, and I think it's worth sharing. When you travel to different countries, especially if you have electronic items, phones, iPads, laptops, watches, we're traveling in different countries and they have different outlet formats. How do you charge them all? It doesn't save a lot of space, but here a little, there a little, especially when you're dealing with only 2 or 3 backpacks for 2 or 3 people, then it really makes a difference. Well, it's a power strip, and this allows us to charge all of our devices with only one adapter plug. So we are not having to take a whole set of adapters, and we're also not struggling to find enough outlets in the hotel, in the apartment, in the friends or relatives' home in which we are staying. And so it's incredibly useful and just one of those little traveler tricks which we make use of every time. So these were the main things that stood out to us in hindsight as being worth sharing and recommending, and which we certainly plan to use next time. Liesel turned out to be the best little traveling companion. She coped so incredibly well and even enjoyed portions of the trip which were really quite stressful for us grown-ups. She was just beaming the whole time. We had one especially memorable episode when one of our flights was delayed for 3 hours, and that meant that our connecting flight we were practically guaranteed to miss, but we were determined to try for it anyway. She was completely silent the entire mad dash through the massive airport as we were frantically scrambling to make our flight. She just sat on top of the luggage in the carry pack on our shoulders, being passed hand to hand as we went through security checkpoints and so forth, just smiling and happy. She thought it was the grandest adventure. She was also completely fascinated and taken by the train trips and ferry and boat rides, even though sometimes she was so incredibly exhausted that she could hardly keep her eyes open. She didn't want to close them because everything was new and interesting to her. Of course, with so much travel, you can expect to meet some unfriendly people along the way, and when you have a baby, you feel it even more acutely. We had 3 such experiences, one on the ferry, one on a flight, and one in an airport, in which an individual really behaved out of line and badly. But that's just part of the game, and we always turned everything into fun moments with the baby. Of course, to the desperation of these individuals. I'd like to wrap up by telling you what we'd do differently next time, after having completed this first adventure and being able to assess and evaluate and say, that worked well, that wasn't so good, and say, we're experienced pros with a baby now. But we have thought long and hard, and we can't think of anything that we would like to do differently. All the planning and thought that we put into preparation really paid off. And that's why we call this first trip truly successful. It was not a stress. It was not a struggle. We had some tricky moments, but we went with the attitude of let's adapt, let's adjust, let's take it as it comes, let's enjoy being with the baby wherever we are. And it was fabulous. You also can have such positive travel experiences. The secret is to, first of all, do your homework beforehand. Don't think that it's a waste of time to go through every detail, because it will save you time, money, and loads of baby tears. Certainly don't be afraid to travel with your little one. Take that trip. Simply go with a flexible mindset and find a way to enjoy every moment together. So if you're on the fence about whether or not to plan a trip with your little baby, or maybe you have one coming up out of necessity or choice and you're feeling a bit apprehensive about it at this point, I hope this video has given you maybe some ideas of how to make it easier and how to make it really work well, and maybe encouraged you to go for it. So just have fun and happy travels.